Nebraska is probably one of the few teams, if not one of the only teams, that you could make a full video on regarding their special teams unit. Most other teams, special teams units, and I would say all other Big Ten teams' special teams units, were not bad enough in 2021 and didn't transform enough in the 2022 preseason that you could make a video on them. Nebraska is going to change their punter, their kicker, their return specialist. They're going to have a different look on the offensive line, a very different look on the defensive line. And yes, you get the point. Their whole special teams unit is going to look, it's going to have mostly completely new, unfamiliar faces to not just the world, but also to some Husker fans as well. And that's why I'm making this video. Plus, Nebraska finally has a special teams unit. A very proven special teams coach is what I meant to say. But they also finally, I think, have a special teams unit. That's a fair point, because they really did not have one last year. It directly cost them, and I think 2, maybe more games, and it certainly had a hand in all 9 of their losses. Nebraska's special teams unit really didn't exist. It was 128th in efficiency, according to ESPN, and that's where we're going to start this video. I just want to talk about for a few minutes how bad this unit was, because it needs to be given attention. Most teams do not lose several games due to special teams errors. They don't. Well, Nebraska was one of those. It was one of those rare teams. Nebraska was 39th overall in efficiency according to ESPN. They were top 40 in ESPN FPI, but they had a major outlier. That outlier being special teams efficiency, which was 129th in the nation. Only Mississippi State and Temple were worse. Only them. Only those teams were worse. And Mississippi State, if we're being honest, probably has a much better head coach. They had an easier non-conference schedule, which helps compensate and helped get them to 7 wins, a 7-6 record, whereas Nebraska had a 3-9 record. Mike Leach teams, from what I understand and what I know, traditionally do not have great special teams units, and Temple, who was 130th, was an absolute mess who just axed their head coach and brought in a new one. Nebraska was less efficient on special teams than Vanderbilt, UTEP, Western Michigan, Georgia State, Rice, Kent State, Louisiana Tech, New Mexico, Toledo, Florida Atlantic, Georgia Southern. The list goes on and on and on. You could list nearly countless group of 5 teams who had better special teams units, at least by efficiency, several of those having much better special teams statistically as well, especially in the kicking department, where Nebraska mightily struggled. And that's where we're going to start off talking about the specifics of Nebraska's struggling special teams unit in 2021. A unit that, again, had a hand in most, if not all, of Nebraska's losses. Let's start out with kicker Connor Culp, who was the Big Ten Kicker of the Year in 2020. He made 13 out of 15 field goals, mid-80% make field goal percentage. I don't really know how to explain that. But anyway, he was a good kicker, and he was accurate. He got the job done, helped Nebraska stay in some games that they shouldn't have necessarily stayed in the 2020 season. But in 2021, he cost Nebraska some games directly. The Oklahoma game, I would say, is the most noteworthy one. You could also somewhat blame him in part for some of the hardships faced in the Illinois game, where if he made some of his extra points, the game would have been 30-24 instead of 30-22. And if you don't think that makes a whole lot of difference, getting a touchdown, which would have tied it if he made both of his extra points, and then assuming he could make a 4th one, making that other point, they would have won the game. But instead, if Nebraska actually drove down and got a touchdown, they would have to get a 2-point conversion to tie it instead of kicking an extra point to win it. Just a single point can matter. And missing extra points, I would also say is quite demoralizing for the whole team as well. But the Oklahoma game, Oklahoma was the number 3 team in the nation at the time Nebraska played them. And Oklahoma was thought to be a playoff contender, possibly a national title contender. Oklahoma was favored, from what I understand, to flatten Nebraska in Norman. They were favored by 22.5 points. 22.5. 22. Some people thought that it would look like Oklahoma would be playing a group of 5 school. And that was anything but the case. Nebraska was in this game. The game was 7-3 Oklahoma for the majority of the game. Nebraska was in this. Nebraska and Oklahoma both had around 400 yards, OU with 408, Nebraska with 384. Nebraska turned it over once, throwing a pick, but that was on a long 4th down anyway that Nebraska probably wouldn't have converted. If Culp made his field goals in that game, he was 1 of 3, 1 of 1 on extra points, but what though that stat doesn't tell you is that one of his extra points was blocked. That was more so, and of course, on the offensive line and the special teams unit as a whole. But let's say you take all those special teams errors, the blocked extra point, but especially the 2 missed field goals, and you give them all to Nebraska. Let's say Culp makes one of his attempts from 50 plus and one of his attempts in the 30-yard long range. That gives Nebraska 6 extra points. And if the blocked PAT doesn't happen, that subtracts 2 points from Oklahoma and adds a point to Nebraska. The score would have been 23-21 Nebraska had all special teams units changed, all special teams errors changed in favor of Nebraska, and everything else stayed the same. Would have been 23-21 Nebraska. That game was the embodiment of Nebraska's special teams unit, a unit that doesn't help your defense by when you punt, you pin your opponent inside the 20. Instead, what you do is you don't help your defense. You demoralize your offense by when your offense inevitably, because this happens to most offenses in games against top 3 opponents, inevitably when your offense is stopped and you have to make a choice. Either you're going for it on 4th down or you're kicking it. You make your offense feel like they just wasted driving down the field because you can't kick a field goal. And this was the story of Nebraska's special teams unit for the whole stinking year. Demoralizing the whole team, breaking them mentally, making it tougher for both sides of the ball. Nebraska's special teams did the exact opposite of what a special teams unit was to do. Instead of assisting your whole team, making life easier for the offense and defense, they made life harder for the offense and defense. And it wasn't just the Oklahoma game. The Michigan State game, punter William Pristup made an incorrect punt. The punt went to the other side of the field where it wasn't supposed to go. And Jaden Reed returns it for 6, ties the game. Michigan State wins with a field goal in overtime. That's another loss that if you just changed that one play, everything else constant, Nebraska wins. And if you just change those 2 losses over OU and Michigan State, which Michigan State was a top 20 team, number 20 in the nation at the time, OU was the number 3 team at the time. The Illinois loss, instead of being something that really is looked back upon as Nebraska football for 2021, a bunch of close games, but any opponent with a pulse, Nebraska loses to. Instead of the Illinois loss becoming what represents the 2021 season, what you have is a 5-1 start. Because again, Michigan State and Oklahoma, 2 losses, primarily caused by special teams errors. You then have a 5-1 start heading into the Michigan game. And then, looking at the rest of the schedule, you had Michigan, Minnesota, you had Purdue, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Iowa, which were all losses. A lot of those games probably aren't losses if Nebraska had better special teams, was on a 5-1 start, giving your team some more momentum and some more confidence. And really, it just came down to that the special teams unit was not a good unit. Chase Contreras, Connor Culp, William Pristup, the offensive line that helped protect the kicker and the punter. They didn't do their jobs. They weren't efficient. And that's why many of them are either transferring out, benched, or they just plain and simple graduated, and the fan base is not going to miss them. And that's not my own. It's not even an insult, actually. It's just in some ways a fact. Nebraska's special teams unit was horrible. But now that we're over with that, I want to get into what's going on and why the special teams unit is getting better. Because first 10 minutes, we discussed why they cost their team several victories and why they were just such a bad unit, giving some perspective. Now, I'm going to go over a few points of why I think that Nebraska will have a good special teams unit. Number one, they have all FCS punter Bill Buschini now. And Bill Buschini, honestly, you look at his stats, and he deserved it. His average punt was 46 yards. He punted 69 times for 3,174 yards. 4 of them were touchbacks. 30 of them were inside the 20, whereas all of Pristup's punts, none of them were inside the 20, and 28 of them were longer than 50 yards. Those are really good punting statistics. And Bill Buschini can also handle kickoff duties. He played in 13 games for the Montana Grizzlies, transferred to Nebraska, obviously. He had 75 kickoff attempts for 4,153 yards, 55.4 yards per kickoff average. 27 of them were touchbacks. Only 1 of them was out of bounds. So you got a guy who can punt. You got a guy who can handle kickoff duties. That's critical for Nebraska. Again, punting alone, separating that and leaving all of the special teams constant, but just separating punting, Nebraska would have beaten Michigan State. You can separate the special teams errors into multiple segments and blame individual units for a singular loss. That is huge. That's such a rarity that it's strange. My mind is boggling right now. I really, in a certain sense, can't even process that. Just how those little things matter. And in football, that's told by coaches and everyone. But Nebraska's season is an example of when you don't pay attention to the little things, they come back and just they bite you in the butt. But Bill Buschini's a really good punter. You saw some of him in the spring game, and the fan base, obviously, and for good reason, went crazy over him. He's going to be one of the better punters in the nation. Number 2 is trench play on both sides will likely improve, and I've talked about this in previous videos. You have Devin Drew and Ochaun Mathis coming in through the portal. You have other offensive linemen, namely Kevin Williams, coming in through the portal. Nebraska's upgraded at their offensive line coach. And trench play being upgraded will help not just in protecting your punter and protecting your kicker, making sure that they aren't blocked and giving him some more confidence so maybe he doesn't miss some of those, doesn't mess up some of his punts, trying to avoid incoming defenders or mess up some of those kicks. It just makes the whole special teams unit feel better. And also, maybe having an improved trench play on defense can help your special teams unit block some punts and block some kicks to help penetrate your opponent's offensive line, help more so dominate that line of scrimmage, which of course will help on defense, but can also help on special teams. Number 3 is Nebraska finally has a special teams coach, and this is probably where I'm going to spend a lot of my time in this section talking. Bill Busch worked at Nebraska from 1990 to 1993, again from 2004 to 2007, and now in the present, from 2021 to the present day. He served as a defensive analyst for Nebraska in 2021, helping the Huskers post one of their best defenses in recent years. They only allowed 22.7 points per game in 2021, the program's lowest average since 2010. He served as an assistant coach at Nebraska from '04 to '07. He coached the outside linebackers and served as special teams coordinator in his first season. He then coached safeties and continued to handle special teams duties for the rest of his career. During his tenure, the Huskers blocked 16 kicks, including 7 in 2005. Nebraska ranked top 25 nationally in net punting in 2006 and punt returns in 2005 under Busch as well. The kickoff coverage unit ranked 15th nationally in 2006 after finishing 22nd the previous year. So obviously, now those stats were from over a decade ago, and the game has changed a lot since then. This guy's aged a lot since then, but he has a resume, a very strong one. And if you don't believe me, look at what he did before Nebraska, or in between his multiple tenures at Nebraska. Louisiana State University. He spent 3 seasons there as the safeties coach from 2018 to 2020. He helped the Tigers win their national title in 2019, coached LSU safety Grant Delpit to back-to-back first-team All-American seasons in 2018 and 2019. He also claimed the Thorpe Award. Delpit did as the nation's top defensive back and was a unanimous All-American as a sophomore in 2018. Under Busch's guidance, LSU led the SEC in interceptions in 2018 and 2019. They finished second in the conference in pass efficiency defense in 2018 and were the only SEC team to hold opposing quarterbacks to less than 50% completion percentage, 49.7 in 2018. Off the field, Busch was one of LSU's top recruiters and played a key role in the Tigers landing Heisman Trophy winner Joe Burrow as a graduate transfer quarterback. And before Nebraska, there's also Rutgers, where he helped some terrible Rutgers teams, namely coached by Chris Ash, actually finish in decent positions in multiple defensive categories, like being ranked number 18 in passing defense. Also spent some time at Ohio State, helped with their defensive efforts on the 2015 team, worked with Wisconsin, Utah State, Utah, New Mexico State, Northern Arizona, and his alma mater, Nebraska Wesleyan, where he began his coaching career as a graduate assistant. He has a resume. And Nebraska, half of the battle was them not even caring about the little things, not even having a special teams coach. Well, now you have a special teams coach, and that's a start. You have a guy who can focus on coaching Chase Contreras, on coaching Bill Buschini, on coaching Timmy Bleekrode, on coaching Trey Palmer, on coaching the whole unit. You didn't have that before. Now you at least have that. That's a huge start. And not only that, but you have a lot of good special teams players, whether you got them through the portal, mostly is where they got them, or recruited some of them. You now have a solid special teams unit that's transformed, obviously for the better, from 2021 to 2022, and you pair that with getting a coach as well. New kicker Timmy Bleekrode is a weapon. That's the 4th point. Timmy Bleekrode came out of Furman as a place kicker and a punter. So the guy can kick field goals and can punt. So if Bill Buschini doesn't turn out, which I doubt is the case, or gets injured, Timmy Bleekrode can come in and do as good of a job as well. He had 52 punting attempts for 2,192 yards, long of 60. He averaged 42.2 yards per punt, which is less than Buschini. He's not as good of a punter as Buschini is, obviously. He had 8 touchbacks. 13 of his punts were inside the 20. 11 of them were 50-plus. None of them were blocked. But his main story is field goal kicking. He was 15 of 18 on field goal kicking duties with a long of 51, 83%. Made 83% of his kicks, which is something Nebraska hasn't seen since Connor Culp in 2020. The difference is this guy did it with crowd pressure and with Furman-level talent. Again, he's playing less talent than Nebraska does, but Furman, I don't believe, is known to be a great FCS team, at least like the level of North Dakota State, which is a very talented brand, big-time FCS school, or the talent that, let's say, a Jackson State has now that Deion Sanders is recruiting well. So you have him as well, who can punt. He's a better field goal kicker by resume than Chase Contreras is, than Connor Culp was. And I say was because obviously he's graduated. He isn't with the program anymore. But having a solid kicker who can also be a threat as a punter, so a versatile player who has skill, is critical. He can probably help you win some games instead of helping put pressure on your offense. He can actually help you win games and give the offense some of that morale instead of making them think that they have to score a touchdown on every drive because their kicker can't make a field goal. And finally, wide receiver Trey Palmer, who again, another transfer. You're beginning to see a theme here. Nebraska bringing in a lot of effective transfers on special teams. He's a solid return man. Now he's not great. He's not an amazing return man, but that's not the point. He's better than what Nebraska had. In 2021, for returns, he had 18 attempts at punt returns for 115 yards with a long of 24. And for kickoffs, he had 7 attempts for 142 yards with a long of 28. In 2020, he also had 7 attempts at kickoff returns, except he had 241 yards that year and a kick return for a touchdown. And as a wide receiver, he had 30 receptions in 2021 for 344 yards, 11.5 yards per reception, and 3 receiving touchdowns with a long of 61. He's coming over with wide receivers coach Mickey Joseph, who has been his coach for his entire tenure at Louisiana State University. So all of these things, I think, combined are going to make Nebraska's special teams unit one of the better special teams units in the Big Ten. Now, if Nebraska just brought in one of these transfers or just brought in a special teams coach, the unit, yes, would improve, but it wouldn't be the same story. Nebraska, instead of just bringing in simply a special teams coach or just bringing in a punter, just doing the bare minimum to show some effort, like Nebraska teams have in the past under Scott Frost, they went all in with special teams. They realized, Scott Frost finally realized in year 5, when he's obviously under a lot of pressure, and part of the reason he made a lot of all-in, shoving all his chips in the middle of the table kind of moves, it shows here. Brought in 3 transfers for the punter, kicker, return man, got a special teams coach, and I think it's going to show. I think that Nebraska's special teams, and this is where I will finish, will be a unit that helps the offense and defense rather than hindering it like the 2021 unit and other special teams units of the past in the Scott Frost era at Nebraska. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on Nebraska's special teams unit and how much you think it will improve down below. More videos on different Big Ten teams, including a Michigan State video, are coming within the next few days. So if you want to watch those, along with future Nebraska content and just future college football content in general, make sure to hit that notification bell. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.